Hello everyone, welcome to our today's lesson on equations of fractions. So this is the continuation of all those solving for x stuff. Right? So now instead of just giving us 2 steps or even 3 steps, now we got fractions to work with. Right? And now with fractions, personally, I don't really like working with them. A lot of people, most mathematicians don't. So what we want to do is to get rid of all the fractions first before we do anything else. Right, so looking at a step-by-step process here, a little cheat sheet here, if you will. Right, so in order to cancel out all the fractions, we cannot just take away their new denominators for fun. Right, but our goal is to get rid of the denominators. Right, if we can get rid of this, we're just working with whatever is on top, the numerator, and that's it. So our first step is to multiply everything with the lowest common denominator. Right, so remember, what do you do to one side, you do to the other side. Right, everything in math is equal. Right, and then we do everything as usual. So steps B to E is pretty much a summary of our past 2 lessons. Right, so that's what we have been doing. So the only thing we do with fractions is our step A here, which is to eliminate them. Right, by multiplying everything by the lowest common denominator. Okay, so let's take this example here. 1 over 2 plus x over 3 equals to 4. What's the lowest common denominator? Okay, so what's the smallest number that 2 and 3 can both multiply into? Okay, so it is 6. So what we do now is we multiply the entire thing, everything, by 6. So 1 over 2 times 6 is 3. X over 3 plus 6, or times 6, is 2 times x. 4 times 6 is 24. Okay, well I should probably just make it a bit more clear here, so I'm not skipping too many steps. Okay, so we're just doing 1 over 2 times 6 plus x over 3 times 6, and then 4 times 6. Alright, 1 and 6 can be reduced ahead to 1 and 3. Right, 3 and 6 can be both divided by 3. Right, so that's all we have. 1 times 3, which is 3 here. 2 times x, which is 2x. 4 times 6, 24. And then, business as usual. Isolate the x, inverse operations, all that fun stuff. So 21 is not divisible by 2, so we can just leave it as 21 over 2. Alright, next one. What's the lowest common multiple of all this? The lowest common denominator. 3, 6, and 4. Okay, I want to get rid of them. Okay, so the lowest common multiple is 12. So, we multiply everything by 12, get rid of them all. Right, so we got this times 12, 1 over 6 times 12, 3 over 4x times 12. Okay, let's reduce ahead. 3 and 12 both divisible by 4, 6 and 12 both divisible by 2, 4 and 12 both divisible by 4. So the first one is, right, 2 times x times 4, 8x, minus 2 equals to 3 times x times 3, 9x. Right, make x alone. Why did I don't know why I did that actually. Hold on. Make x alone. I just realized what I did, but here's an easy step. I actually don't know why I did that. So, oh, actually, I know why I did that. I'm just instinctively seeing, oh, look. Here's the fun mistake I made here, right? I'm just instinctively seeing, oh, we got 8x plus 2 on this side. I must isolate the 2 onto this side. But a much faster way is, okay, instead of moving the x's to this side, why don't we just move it to the other side? Right? Because we already have the number here. Instead, we can just move the x to the other side. We're left with negative 2 equals to just x. That's it. So x is negative 2. Right, so yeah, I can forgot about that. But yes, remember, x can be moved, isolated to both sides. Uh-oh, here's a fun one. of course, all my phone wants to me. Lowest common multiple, right? Everything can be multiplied by 6. Right, that's the biggest number that all those numbers can multiply into. That's in common. Okay. So 7x over 3 times 6. So those two can reduce ahead into 1 and 2. So we got 14x. 6 and 6 minus 5. 1 over 2 reduced to 1 and 3. So 3 times 1 is 3. 6, 10, 6 cancelled out. Plus 1. Alright, again, personally, I like to move all the x's on the side where it doesn't become negative. Right, because we can do minus 14x on both sides, but that'll get us minus 13x. Right, I don't want to work with negatives. They are a pain. So I move the x to this side, and then I can move the 5 to this side. So we do plus 5. 13x equals to 8. X is just 8 over 13. Cannot be reduced, cannot be divided. Okay, how about decimals? Right, so if you remember, decimals converting to fractions is just the numerator number over the place value. So in our first example, this is the hundredths place. How did I, there we go. Right, so this is the hundredths place. So it's 4 over 100. X. 0.8, 8 right here is in the 10th place, so it's 8 over 10. Lowest common multiple in this case is 100. Right, so 100, that's get cancelled out, it's 4x. 10 and 100 both divisible by 10. That's 8 times 10 is 80. Divide both sides by 4. Ta-da, there we go. Okay, so that's how we do fractions. Just one extra step of find the lowest common multiple. But everything else is business as usual. Right, a side note, for questions like this, you can still do the same. You don't actually have to do this. Right, we can still move things around here. Right, you can still do, say, 7x over 3 minus x plus minus over 6, and then 1 over 2 plus 5 over 6. Right, you can still do it the regular way, and then figure out from there. But if we multiply everything by the lowest common multiple, or the lowest common denominator, right, we just have easier numbers to work with instead of working with fractions. But again, that's up to you. Okay? So now in this case, we have decimals. Right? And now with decimals, we also don't like to work with decimals. Right? Those also are a pain. Because operations gets weird, we have to move decimal places when divide and multiply. So what we can do is to get rid of it. Now, how do you get rid of decimals? Right, so remember from earlier, what we did is we converted it into fractions. Right, but to be honest, that takes too much work. Right, that's 2 extra steps you gotta do, convert into fractions and then lowest common multiple and that kind of stuff. Right? So now we can just think of it as how many decimal places we need to move. Right, in this case, right, we got 1 decimal place to move to make it not a decimal. We also got 1 decimal place to move, in this case, to make it not a decimal. Because again, they're both over 10. Right, they're in the 10th place. Right, and because we just have to move 1 decimal at a time, we can then just multiply everything by 10 right away. Right, they're both in the 10th place. We can just multiply everything by 10 up here. Because remember, whenever we multiply by a 0, right, or sorry, not by 0, by a place value, by 10, by 100, we're just moving that many decimal places. So 3.2 times 10 is 32. We move 1 decimal place. 9.6 becomes 96. 16 becomes 160. From there, business as usual. A is 8. Okay, just like that. Yeah, look how disgusting this is. But fear not. Right, all I have to do is find the lowest common multiple. Here, that's a thousandths place. Right, so this is going to be over 1,000. This is over 100, over 100, over 1,000. So the biggest number here is over 1,000. So we can just multiply everything by 1,000. Right, LCM is 1,000. Okay, let's see. 0.002b times 1,000. Right, we're multiplying by 1,000. Oops, blocking here. We're multiplying everything by 1,000. So we're moving 3 decimal places. So this becomes 2b. Alright, so be careful here. 0.05 times 1,000. Alright, 1.273 decimal places. Alright, we actually get a gap there. So it's actually 50. Right? Same as 0.03b. This is 30. B, and I got 3 decimal places here. So 6. Okay, let's start rearranging. Right, again, we can do minus b on both sides, or minus 30b on both sides. Right, but again, this becomes a negative b. I don't feel like working with negative numbers. But again, that doesn't really matter. It's up to you. Right, so I'm going to do minus 2b on both sides. So now the b will be positive. So which means I have to move the numbers, but plus 6 onto the left. You got 56 equals to 28b. B is just 2. Okay, so that's how we get rid of decimals. Decimals are just fractions, pretty much. Alright, so this is, again, just a quick little thing about spiel about percentage. We talked a little bit more about it last time. Right, so percent literally means over 100, right? Every 100 per. Right, so I feel like my banana is like 20 bucks, not 20 bucks, 4 bucks per pound. That's still kind of expensive, actually. Right, so dollars per pound. So it's every 100. So that to convert percentages into decimals or fractions, we just divide it by 100. So 51% is just 51 divided by 100. Right, so we got 51 here, we got decimal place here. Divide by 100, so we just move 2 decimal places to the left to get 0.51. Right, 6.8. Divide by 100. 6.8. Move decimal place 2 places. 1, 2. You got a gap here, so we put in the 0. Alright, 0.2, of course. Doesn't matter where the decimal is, we're just moving it 2 places to the left. 1, 2. Right, there we go. Yeah, 1, 2. So I got confused by my own zeros for a second. Oh wow, that was trippy. Okay, anyways. But yeah, move it to the place to the left, right? 1, 2. Fill in the extra zeros in there. Okay, so now back to our word problems with fractions this time. A number that's 25% of 8. So what's 25%? 25 over 100. So 0.5. So what is 0.5 of 8? I would just multiply it. So 8 times 0.5 is just 2. Because you gotta think of it as fractions. So it's 8 times 25 over 100, or 8 times 1 over 4. Also 2, right? Fractions of decimals. Okay, so let's try a more complicated word problem here. Mr. C scored 45% on the test. It has a total, or not the total, but that 45% is 28.35. So now what is the total points? Right, so the total points of a test is unknown. We want to know how many points is the whole test out of. And now Mr. C here only scored 45% on a test, which means that 45%, right, in decimal form or fractions, is just 0.45. Right, so 45% of the test is 28.35, which means that 45 times x, which is total points, is 28.35. Alright, so business as usual. Multiply everything by 100. Right, remember decimal moving, right? 1, 2 places, 1, 2 places. Divide everything by 45, which is 63. So the test is out of 63 points. And Mr. C, scoring 45%, is 28.35. Right, and if you can check your calculator, 28.35 divided by 63 is indeed 0.45. Okay, so that's how it works with fractions. We don't like them, they're annoying, we want to get rid of them as soon as possible. Alright, so we find the lowest common multiple of all the denominators. So in this case, we get 2 and a 3. Lowest common multiple is 6. We multiply everything by 6, and then do everything as we did for the past few lessons. And yeah, just be careful with percentages, right? With decimal percentages, we also don't like decimals. We want to multiply it by the biggest place value to get rid of all the decimals, and then work from there. Alright, that's all. Good luck practicing.